Volvinaka, Nayadango o Alipate Traill, ni Levuka Ovalau, Lomai Viti. Volvinaka everybody, my name is Alipate Traill. I hail from the island of Ovalau in the Lomai Viti group. I am the 2021 Pacific Dance New Zealand Artist in Residence. I was born in Fiji and have been dancing since I was a very young child. I trained at the Polynesian Cultural Center in Hawaii in performing arts, costuming, and theater, as well as cultural presentation. Due to the recent community outbreaks in Auckland, we have shifted my residency online. Please note that all the people in this video are all in my bubble. Vinaka. Nisa Vinaka, and welcome back, children, rangone, families and friends. Great to have you back here with us tonight. Nanodato ulutanga ni kua, or this tonight's theme is our Vakavanua, Ways of the Land, Part 2. Let's get right into it, rangone. We'll start with Tutu Vakavanua. So all of you can trace your family history or your family groups or genealogy into one particular part of Fijian society. So we all belong to one different group, yeah? So the different groups that we have, of course, it's very important that every society and every country has a leader. Overall, on the top of overall structure, there's always the highest leader. And then below him is his assistant leaders. And below him is, he might have some type of military or army that kind of help him enforce the law. And then you have other little leaders, and then everybody else playing different parts in society to ensure that it works well together. So let's take a closer look at Fijian society, or Tutu Vakavanua. So our first one at the top, if you look at our pictures, you'll see a man dressed in Masi, or tapa cloth, right? So our chief, he is our high chief. So at the top of our society, or Tutu Vakavanua, we have our Turanga. You want to say it after me? Turanga. Turanga. Okay? So Turanga is our high chief at the top of the leadership chain, right? Our Turanga sits at the top, and he has the ultimate power. He has all the decision-making power. All the people and the other leaders below him all respect him, and they follow his advice, and they usually carry out the things that he asks them to do. Okay? Turanga, our chief, can be a man or can be a woman. Okay? In Fijian society, we have both men that are chiefs and also women that are chiefs as well. So if you know somebody is a chief in Fiji, say if I was a chief, and my name is Alipate, one word will go before my name, okay? So if you think about the royal family in England, if you think about Queen Elizabeth's son, her elder son, his name is Charles. What's the word or the title that goes before his name? We know him as, correct, Dondonungor Binaka. So we call him, his title is Prince Charles, okay? So in Fiji, Vakaviti, our title for prince or somebody of noble birth or royal blood is Ratu. Okay, want to say it after me? Let's say it all together. Ruatolu, Ratu, Ratu. So say if I was a Ratu or a chief or a prince, my name would be Ratu Alipate. So if there was a woman who was the high chief, and she was the leader in her tribe or her province. So before her name, say if her name was Mariah, her title before her name Mariah would be Andi, A-D-I, Andi. We'd say Andi Mariah, okay? Or sometimes for short, you will hear some of our people say, instead of saying Andi Mariah, they'll say Ndi Mariah, okay? You'll hear Ndi before her name, yeah? So that's Turanga, or you can hear Turangambale or Maramambale. So we come down in the ranks, the next one below him or below the Turanga is Sauturanga. Okay, you want to say it after me? Natabutu kedea Sauturanga. Totoka rangone. So Sauturanga is our secondary or sub-chiefs. Okay, so these guys, their jobs is to support the overall, the big chief on top, Turanga. Okay, Sauturanga, they have the power to invest, or what's the word, to crown the king, if you want to put it that way. Okay, so they'll decide, they'll say, okay, this royal family here in the village, and so is the oldest in the family. We nominate him to become the next Ratu or next Turanga, next prince or leader of our province or our village. Okay, so that's Sauturanga. They're the ones who can choose who becomes the next Ratu or the king, and then they have the power. They create the ceremonies, and their job is also to make sure that all the ceremonies and the customs are done according to how they're supposed to be done, right? So that's Sauturanga. So you have Turanga, Sauturanga, and so let's just come below the Sauturanga. If you're a chief or a chiefess in Fiji, you have your own spokesperson, okay? The spokesperson. Imagine going to a function or a big get-together, and you don't have to say much because you have your own spokesperson who will address the people, who will talk to them, who will respond on behalf of when ceremonies are accorded to you. You might just say 1 or 2 words when you drink your first bowl of yangona or when you hold a tambua, but then you always pass the tambua on to your mata Nivanua, right? So you want to say that after me, mata Nivanua, okay? Mata Nivanua is your spokesperson, okay? The king or the queen or Ratu or Andi's mata Nivanua. So he will carry the messages from Ratu or Andi or the Turanga or Sauturanga to the people in the village, and he will relay what the people have to say back to their leaders, okay? But at ceremonies and functions, it's his job to do the official speaking, okay? The official oratory or talking on behalf of the Turanga or the Sauturanga. That's the Mata Nivanua, okay? Speaker of the chiefs, Mata Nivanua. So that's the 3 main ones at the top. You have your Turanga, Sauturanga, Mata Nivanua. So right below the Mata Nivanua is our Bete. Okay, if you have a look at the picture, how you can always know the Bete is he always has, of course, he's wearing his Masi, but there's always one special thing about the Bete that he always has on his head. He always has a Masi turban, looking like a hat on his head made out of Masi. Yeah? So remember, before Christianity came to Fiji, we also had our old religion. And a very important part of Fijian society, or Tutu Vakavanua, is our priests, or Bete. So have any of you seen the tallest hut, Ombure, in an old Fijian village? It's got a very, very long roof shaped like a triangle, goes really, really tall. Yeah. You might have seen one in Pacific Harbour at the Cultural Center. I believe there's one in Nandi as well. And the other one I know of is in Hawaii at the Polynesian Culture Center in the Fiji village. So the Bete, of course, his role is to carry out religious ceremony. Very important role for him. He's also the spiritual advisor to the Turanga and the Sauturanga. Okay, in the old days, the Bete had a lot of power to influence the chief. So whenever the chief would be thinking about making a decision on what am I going to do about this problem I have with some enemies who want to take some of our land or who want to invade us, what shall we do to prepare? He would go and consult with the Bete. And what would the Bete do? He would consult with God. Perfect. So Mbure Kalo, Mbure meaning house, Kalo meaning God, house of God, Mbure Kalo. So inside the Mbure Kalo grounds is very, very sacred. Not anybody can go on to the grounds. It's a tambu area that's always guarded by warriors, okay? So in the Mbure Kalo, the Bete would sit inside there, he'd do his prayers, he'd do his meditation. And inside the Mbure Kalo, from the tallest part of the roof, was tied a white piece of Masi or cloth, Masi cloth, yeah? And it would hang all the way down from the middle of the Mbure Kalo down to the bottom where the Bete would sit. So stories say that when the Bete would offer prayers and consult the gods in regards to advice for the chief or the Vanua, how he received his answers was very interesting. So the stories say that when he would receive an answer, the Masi cloth would tremble or shake from the top of the Mbure Kalo coming down through the white Masi. Yeah, like an energy force coming down through the Masi. And of course, the Bete would be down the bottom to receive his answer through the Masi. And this is how Bete played an important role in old Fijian religion. So we still have Bete today, of course, around Fiji, but of course their roles are changed. We call them talatala now, right? Talatala or preachers or church leaders. Okay, we have our Methodist talatala, we have our Bete in the Catholic churches, we have our Seventh-day Adventist talatala, and all different talatalas from different churches, yeah? But the role is still the same. In the Vanua, the church or religion is still very important and respected well. And so that's the role of the Bete. So remember I said outside the old Mbure Kalo, they would be protected by who? This is our next person we talk about in Fijian society is our Mbati. You want to say, repeat after me? Mbati. B-A-T-I, Mbati. Okay, Mbati is our warriors. Okay, the warriors in every village or every province, their role are like a military. Okay, so it's their job to protect the Vanua, protect the village, and also to help defend and also to attack. Okay, so their role was in the old days when invading tribes would come, they would of course surround the village or build fortresses and fight to protect their land and their property and their families. Sometimes they would have to leave their village and go to war somewhere else, and to go either jump on a canoe and sail or walk across the land and navigate through dense forests for many, many days to reach the territory of their enemies, okay, to go and sort out a problem. Okay, so that's our Mbati or our warrior class or clan. So our next most important people in Tutu Vakavanua or Fijian society or structure is our Matai Sao. Dadabutakadea Rua Tolu Matai Sao. Matai Sao. Okay, the Matai Sao are very important in our society as well. They are the ones who build our canoes and build our bure or our massive Vale Vakaviti Fijian houses. And so we would have, their job was to carve the big canoes, okay, build the big bure or vale, and make the weapons. They also carve all our our clubs, our spears, very, very important part of Fijian society, okay? And in the old days, the big canoes sometimes took up to 7 years to complete. Okay, so that's our Matai Sao, craftsman, the one who builds canoes and builds huts as well. After the Matai Sao, we have our very own fishermen, okay? Our fishermen, it's a skill, it's a gift. And this particular group of people, we call them our In Dao. Okay, want to repeat after me? In Dao, Rua Tolu. In Dao, In Dao. So In Dao is our fisher folk or fisher people who go out, and their job is to bring fresh food from the sea every day. Okay, for the chief, Firstly for the chief, then the people, okay? The best of everything was always given to our Ranga, our chiefs, okay? Because we had to honor him that way because he looked after us. In times of need, he would protect us. He would send his best warriors to protect all of us. When we don't have war and we are experiencing times of plenty or times of many blessing, we would honor our chief by giving him the best of the fish from the sea, the best of the fruits and the crops from the plantation, the best Masi, the best mats, and so forth. Yeah. So our last and most important, not the least important, of course, in our group, is when our chiefs die. Even in death, we still honor our chiefs, and the chief always has his own grave diggers. Okay, so this is a special job for a special group of people only. Not just anybody can go and dig the grave and then bury the grave when our chief is laid to rest. Okay, we call them our mbota. Okay, mbota. So that's our grave diggers for the chiefs. It's their job. If you look in the picture that we have on presentation, you'll see the grave has already been buried. See the big Masi or Ngatu there, and the grave diggers or the mbota are already sitting down in a respectful way and paying their homage to the chief, okay? So that's their job. Not just anybody can do that, because we always believe that our chief is sacred. Our chief is a leader from God, and that we must honor him and treat him with a lot of respect, because he in turn looks after us and takes care of us. All right, so that's our Fijian society, Tutu Vakavanua. So part of that as well is our Tavi Vakavanua. Tavi Vakavanua is the roles of the land or jobs of the land that were very important, okay? So that's the roles, Tutu Vakavanua. That's what you see, the structure when we have big ceremonies or big functions. And that's what all the main people that are involved when we're in, like, having a celebration or a big party, that which we call a solevu, okay? When the Vanua is having a solevu or big function or celebration, that's when you see the role of the leadership come out and serve and conduct on how things are supposed to go. So let's talk about Tabi Vakavanua, or roles of the land. So roles of the land, the first one we look at the top of our list is our Vuniwai. Okay, let's say it all together. Say it all together with me. Vuniwai, the toka. Okay, Vuniwai are our own doctors. Okay, so believe it or not, before Europeans came to Fiji, before we got hospitals and chemists, pharmacies where we go to buy medicine and so forth, we have our own doctors. Okay, our doctors are the holders of the knowledge of traditional medicine that you find in our natural environment. So yes, it's very interesting to know that even before we had modern medicine, we already have our traditional medicine for thousands of years. But did you know, kids, Rangone, that modern day medicine is a combination of traditional medicine and knowledge from indigenous cultures like us Itoke Fijians, as well as other indigenous cultures around the world, combination of their knowledge of natural medicine as well as science mixed together, yeah? So it's not to say that just Western medicine knows everything. A lot of our ancient knowledge, sometimes our natural medicine is better than the stuff that we're taking today. Because sometimes the medicine we have today is just made in a science lab. It's not natural, made from different chemicals, yeah? And our medicine from the nature is always the best, okay? Fresh is best, so always remember that. So that's our doctors, Vuniwai. Let's look at our next person in society, Tabi Vakavanua. We have Downey Vudu. Want to repeat after me? Downey Vudu. Okay, Downey Vudu. Downey Vudu is your dance creator, dance choreographer. also known as a poet, because they write and create new dances from the stories they see and hear in their village. That's a Downey Vudu, okay? You can call me a Downey Vudu because I also teach dance and write some meke, put tunes and sing, make actions. So that's a Downey Vudu, okay? Very important part, you must be wondering, why is a dance choreographer and teacher important in Tutu Vakavanua or Tutu Vakavanua, okay? Because remember, Rangone, we never had pens and papers to write down our history. So guess whose job was it to preserve all the history from your village? Correct, yes, the Downey Vudu had an important job. That was one way that the history of that village could be preserved and passed down from generation to generation. Was through the writing of poems, cleverly writing in the history during the dance, putting it into a tune, adding actions, creating beautiful costumes. And that's how the story of the victory of that battle got preserved and passed on to the next generation. Okay, because we didn't have iPads or laptops or smartphones or even pen and paper to write them down. So our ancestors put them into music, into dance, into poetry, and words of wisdom along those lines. Yeah. So that's our Downey Vudu. So next on our list, we leave the Downey Vudu, who is the poet and the dance creator, the preserver of history through music and dance. We move now down to the arts, okay? The things that were made with our hands. We look at Ndao Tulituli, okay? Want to repeat after me? Ndao Tulituli, okay? So when you hear the word Tulituli, this means to make pottery, okay? So in Fijian society in old days, before we got iron and steel pots and baking dishes and ovens and all these fancy gadgets that we have nowadays in our kitchen, we made our pots from clay soil, okay? Clay soil, nice and thick, would be molded with water and sand and beaten into the shape of pots, massive vessels for drinking water, and so forth. Okay, if you look at our picture, you'll see some of the women there making smaller objects with the clay. Okay, Dao Tulituli pottery makers are very important because before we got all our pots and pans from the Western world, that was their job to create all our cooking stuff. So of course, we know we have to eat every day, right? Kids, 3 times a day. So we needed things to cook our food in. So that's Ndao Tulituli or pottery makers. And also at the same time, pottery makers, their influence in history, because when they would move from one island to another and so forth over the years, they left their pots behind. Okay, so when they would leave, they would probably, because they were big and heavy, and they would think, we'll just make a new one when we move to our new island, we find our new home, we'll make some new ones. So they would leave it. And so these pots would get buried and covered up under hundreds and even thousands of years of history. And so this is how archaeologists who study the movement of people and history have been able to tell us where people came from, how long they spent in an area, and where they moved to, because these pottery makers left traces of where they used to live as they moved. And we call this the Lapita pottery, okay? The name Lapita comes from a place in New Caledonia where it was first discovered. And then from there, they started a search and research into all different parts of the Pacific, where they found pieces of pottery all over the Pacific moving. So that showed to historians and archaeologists and anthropologists that these people moved through the Pacific at different points in history. Yeah, and they left a trail of evidence along the way for us to find in modern times and learn about them. So the pottery makers on Ndao Tulituli are very important in Fijian society. Okay, so we move from Ndao Tulituli to Masi or Ndao Keskesa. Okay, you'll hear the word Masi. Okay, that gives you a hint of who I'm talking about. Look behind me here on the wall, of course, you'll see a nice big Masi, okay, a nice big taunamu. This is our Masi. Remember before Europeans came to Fiji, we didn't wear cotton material. We didn't wear the clothes that we have today. We had a combination of liku or skirts as well as Masi. Okay, Masi was our material, our fabric, our cloth to clothe our bodies, yeah? So the role of a Masi maker, very, very important today in Fiji. And thankfully, it's still a very active and a very alive industry today. Today in the Pacific, Fiji and Tonga are the two largest makers of tapa, or Masi, we say in Fiji, yeah? Tonga, of course, makes bigger, like the bigger pieces. In Fiji, though, we make our pieces are a lot smaller, but we make more of them in larger quantity. Yeah. So with the Masi, we use them for our 21st. We can use them for our birthdays. We use them at weddings. We use them at funerals. We use them to decorate the house. It's just always beautiful to see Masi when you go to somebody's house or a special event. Yeah. Okay. So only 3 main areas of Fiji make Masi today. Okay, this is the island of Vatulele, just off the coast of Vitilevu. And then you have the Lao group of islands. Not all of the Lao islands make them. Only have certain islands like Mode, Nayau, Kambara, and maybe a few other little islands in the Lao group that make the Masi. And then we have the other bigger producers in Fiji is up in Natewa, okay? Somosomo, Taviuni, all around that area there, okay, in Vanua level. In the old days, other parts of Fiji used to make it, but sadly, some of those parts have stopped making it, yeah? So here I'm wearing a Masi Salu. Of course, the roses or the flowers are made out of vau, the same material we use for our skirts, liku vau, but the bottom part is Masi, yeah? So yeah, that's our Ndao Keskesa or Downey Masi, our Masi makers. Okay, so the last one I want to talk to you about is our Ndao Tulituli. Okay, these are our weavers. Okay, so our weavers would make these beautiful mats that, like I have here, a small sample in front of me. Okay, look at this beautiful mat. Their job was to weave these beautiful creations. Now, of course, this is a very small mat, okay? This is a mat for a baby. Okay, when a baby is born on a 1-year-old, or not even one, newborn, of course, you can spread this mat, even on their first birthday as well. This is something you could use. Now, mats and weavers, very important role. Okay, of course, this comes from the pandanus tree. Okay, so here's a big roll of voi voi. You want to repeat after me? Voi voi. Okay, so voi voi, these are just the dried leaves, similar to the harakeke of New Zealand. Remember what the Maori used to weave their ketes or their baskets or their weaving? They used the harakeke plant. Okay, but the harakeke is very strong and stiff, a lot harder to work with. If you touch a voi voi leaf is much softer and flexible. Okay, so it's green. This is what it looks like when it's been rolled up. It's been boiled and sunned out and rolled up into a nice big roll, and it's now ready to be weaved into a mat. Okay, but again, to get it to this point, just like the Masi, it involves a lot of work. Not an easy job. So that's why we call it a labor of love. So that's why our handiwork is always beautiful, because of all the hard work that goes into producing a voi voi for our imbe or our mats, yeah? So we call it a labor of love, and that's why a lot of our families value it, because our mbumbus, our nays or aunties, or our cousins, they spend lots and lots of hours preparing the leaves from the time they cut it from the tree. And believe it or not, this voi voi leaves usually have rows of thorns on each side and the middle of the leaf. I remember going with my bumbu once to cut some voi when I was still in Fiji. And she warned me about the thorns, and I thought, it's not going to hurt me. But, I went and tried to pick it anyhow, and I cut my fingers. And so before they even get it ready to be boiled, they have to cut all the thorns off, slice them off one at a time, one leaf at a time. And then they boil it, and they roll it up, sun it out in the sun, then it all turns brown. And then you have to flex it with a shell to make it soft, pliable, yeah? And so here's one roll of voi. In Fijian, we say, donai vimbini voi. So we say roll of voi, vimbini voi. That's how you say roll of voi in Fijian, okay? The same thing in our canoes. How do we make sails for a canoe? If we didn't have material, or if we didn't have all the modern things that we have today, how would we make a sail for a canoe? Any guesses? Yes, we'd use exactly the imbe. Okay, so the women would weave the sail out of the voi plant, same thing. And they would string it up onto the canoe. So say if this looks like, here we go, a triangle, okay? Doesn't that look like the top of a canoe sailing? So that's exactly what they would use. They would use the voi to create the sail, or we call it lava niwanga, sail of the canoe. The sail we say lava, and the canoe we say wanga, lava niwanga, yeah? So that's our imbe. So that's the Ndao Tulituli, the weaver's very important role in Fijian society. So Rangone, that is the end of our information session on our theme this week, which is Tutu Vakavanua, Tavi Vakavanua. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that session. I hope you learned something new. And also, I hope that you are able to go and talk to mom and dad, nana and pa, or tutua sembu, or momo senei, go and ask auntie or uncle, or irna tavalemu. Some of your cousins might even know as well. Find out which part of society that your family comes from and what's your traditional role in Fijian society. Vinaka, mo tokamanda.